In this video, I'm going to show how to install the latest 5.8.7 ICS firmware on the Arc, as well as how to root it, install recovery, and install a custom firmware even if you have a locked bootloader. So I borrowed this Arc since I've moved on to other phones, but the Arc is still one of my favorites because of its design. So just to show that it does have a locked bootloader, *# service, and then service info and configuration. So as you can see there, it says bootloader unlocked allowed no, and it is a Rogers carrier branded phone, so the only way to unlock the bootloader is to pay for it, and that's in another one of my videos. So there is an existing video back in June on how to update and root the ICS, and not much has changed since then. So here's the 5.8.7 firmware for the LT17i, and if you see the third post, the instructions are pretty easy. So what you're doing is you're going to flash 5.8.7, and then you're going to flash an insecure kernel, which is a lower version since A comes before B, and then you're going to root using the 2011 Rooting Toolkit right here, and then after that you flash the kernel back on. So it wasn't until September that they released a generic version of the LT15A, and you can install any firmware onto any phone, but some people like having the appropriate firmware for their region. Not that it really matters, I've never run into any issues. So again, this works on any Arc. The Arc does not have to be rooted because you're flashing and wiping everything. Your bootloader does not have to be unlocked. If you've unlocked your phone, network unlock or SIM unlocked, it's permanent, so don't worry about that. This will not unlock your bootloader, and this will wipe your phone. So instead of going through all the driver installs, just install PC Companion and update service. So that's the easiest way to make sure you have all the drivers. And when you've done that, you're going to download 3 files. So the firmware, so this is the LT15A, and then the kernel, just the kernel, as well as the insecure kernel. So back here, 5.8.7, you can download the firmware, and then go down, just the kernel. So there's the kernel only. So same thing, whether you're doing it for the A or the I. As well as downloading the Rooting Toolkit. So once you've done all that, you've got 3 files. Here's the firmware, here's the insecure kernel, and then the kernel for whichever firmware version you're installing on your phone. So to start off, I'm just going to open up the Flash tool. As always, all the links are in the description. Make sure you're using the latest version of the Flash tool. I'm just using 0.86. I think it's up to 0.9 now. So we're going to flash the entire firmware. It's going to wipe everything, so make sure you back up as always. Click OK. Just going to pull the battery quickly. Put it back in. Hold the back button and plug in the phone. The green light's going to come on and it's going to start flashing. So we're about 20% through, and I'm just going to purposely mess this up and cause a boot loop. So I'm just going to unplug it. I'm going to get a nice error. And I'm just going to try to boot up the phone. It should get stuck and messed up. So this is just to show that if anything happens, you can always get it back into flash mode no matter what. Or you can use update service to repair your phone. Once again, just keep flashing it and it should flash back the phone. I've never run into an Arc that I've messed up so badly that I can't flash. Typically, from comments, the only time that the Arc won't flash is when you actually have something damaged or there's a fault with the motherboard or something with the phone physically. Other than that, unless your phone is actually damaged, you'll always be able to get back into flash mode and flash your phone. So there's the triangle, meaning there's no OS, everything's messed up. So I'm just going to try this again. I'm just going to pull the battery and flash the phone again. So flash the entire firmware and OK. Hold the back button and plug in the phone. and it's going to flash. So once the phone is finished flashing, started up, just go through and set it up. And as you can see, it's 4.04 LT15A because I ran the A firmware, and 4.1.B.0.587. So that is the latest ICS build on the Arc. And everything works. A bunch of people always forget that if you've wiped the phone, you need to go into mobile networks, access point names, and then enter in your APN information. There is an APN database online which has all the different carriers, and just go to that website and get all your settings. So now, if you want to root the phone, you're going to have to flash another kernel. So before we do that, I'm just going to quickly go through, go Settings, Developer Options, turn on USB debugging, hit OK, go into Security, and check Unknown Sources, and click OK. Next, you're going to power off the phone to flash the insecure kernel. So once it's off, go back into the flash tool, and this time you're going to flash the ready to root or insecure kernel. Click OK, and plug in the phone. And this time it's really quick, just a few seconds. So there we go. Just unplug it again and start it up. So once the phone is started up, a bunch of people get confused at this part because they expect a change on their phone, and for the most part there shouldn't be anything different. You might have to go through setup and stuff again, but you shouldn't see any visible changes on the device. So if I go back into settings, a bunch of things might crash, apps and force closes, but don't worry about it. If you go back into about, nothing's going to change in here, and that's okay. So for the next step, you're going to go to the Rooting Toolkit. So once again, this is the 2011 Rooting Toolkit from Doomlord. And download and extract it. And you can run the file directly, but I prefer, as always, to run your own command prompt. So start in CMD, and make sure you run as administrator. Also, and this is very important, you must close the flash tool, or else it won't work. It will conflict. Let's close the flash tool, and then just navigate to wherever you unzipped the root tool. So copy, and then CD space, and then right click to paste. There we go. And then run me. So it says it's going to root your phone and install super user, etc. So make sure you plug in your phone and have USB debugging and unknown sources checked. Just going to plug it in. So the phone is on. And once that's done, just hit enter. Just going to start up the start watch again. So it's going to go through, and it's going to reboot your phone a bunch of times. And all done. So So it's just going to reboot one last time. And once the phone is started up, go into the app drawer, and there's Super User. So it has been rooted, but before you can do anything, you're going to have to flash back the kernel. So we're just going to power off once more, and unplug. You can close the command prompt and go back into the flash tool. And this time you're just going to flash back the kernel. So if you downloaded an LT15I firmware, so flash back the I kernel. If you download the A, then flash back the A kernel. So 587. Okay. Hold the back button and plug in the phone. Once again, it's going to be really, really quick, just about 5 seconds. Okay, all done. And then boot up your phone. And once you flash your kernel, all the errors will go away. And that's how you flash the latest 587 firmware as well as root. So there's Super User. There were also a few people who asked if I have the 587 firmware, but the official version for Rogers. And I did upload a copy of that as well. All the links, as always, are in the description. But why bother installing the Rogers firmware if you can install a generic one without all the pre-installed apps? So here's the official Rogers branded 587. And to root it, you do the exact same steps. You download the insecure kernel, you flash it, and then you flash back the 587 kernel, the Rogers version. So now that the phone's been rooted, and the kernel's been flashed back to fix all the errors, the next step is to install recovery. So recovery allows you to modify your phone by doing things like adding in toggle widgets, changing the font, changing themes, etc. Certain things will mess up your phone, certain things won't work with certain firmwares. So if you don't have the patience to experiment and back up and restore your phone, please don't attempt this, because certain things you have to try multiple times to get right, certain things you have to install in certain orders, and there's so many different combinations of apps and themes and widgets that there's no way to account for them all. But despite having a locked bootloader, you can even install custom ROMs. So I'm just going to walk through installing recovery and then installing one of those ROMs. Fortunately, there's now quite a few ways to install recovery, and there's all these auto installers as well as other applications, and you can install them directly from the market. Okay. Just go directly to the Android Play Market and download it, or you can download the APK and sideload it onto your phone. You can also download this program, RecoverX, which you run off your computer and plug in your phone, and it'll install recovery on your phone. So there's quite a few ways to get recovery running on your phone. Just going to show RecoverX. So RecoverX you download and then run, and then you choose your device. So this is the Arc, and then you're on ICS, and you can use this method to install directly onto your phone. You're going to get a Super User pop-up. There it is. Shell has been granted Super User. And on here, I'm going to say reboot your device. When you restart your phone, you're going to keep pressing the back button to get into recovery once you see the Sony logo. And there's recovery. From here, you can do things like wipe and factory reset, format the phone, and do backups. You should always do a backup before modifying your phone. So back on the computer, I'm just going to reboot the phone. Back on the computer, if you go into the Arc development forum, there's a whole bunch of different kernels as well as ROMs to do different things. Some of them will allow you to use on a locked bootloader. Some of them require an unlocked bootloader. So depending on the state of your phone, you can try different ROMs. And as you can see, there's dozens and dozens of ROMs from many different developers. The other thing you can do if you don't want to install a custom ROM is there's tons of modifications. So just remember we're on 5.8.7, so make sure that the modification works with 5.8.7. And there's different mods, such as the system UI from Jelly Bean. Just going to try to pull one up with some screenshots. You can install the Walkman from the newer phones. So this is just another reason to root your phone. So typically what these ROMs require you to do is to download a file and then put it on, copy it over to your phone, and then flash it in recovery. So for example, on the phone, I've already downloaded Jelly Sandwich version 6.2, as well as Ultimate HD, which is another ROM. Another thing I suggest is that you download SuperUser and flash it inside recovery. This typically is easier to get root with. So SuperUser is available directly from the Android SU webpage. And you're going to download whatever version, or the latest version. So ARM devices 4.0 or 4.1. And then copy it as well into the micro SD card on the phone. So once you've done that, you can power off the device, unplug it, and then boot into recovery. So once you're in recovery, be very careful to follow the instructions for each ROM, because certain ROMs will require you to do certain things. So for the Jelly Sandwich ROM, you need to format system, and this will wipe everything on your phone. Because this phone has a locked bootloader, by formatting system, you're also wiping off recovery. So if anything goes wrong, you're going to have to flash the phone over again. And this is where the patience and experimentation come in. So if something does mess up and you get into a boot loop, you're going to have to flash 5.8.7 again, root it, and then flash recovery again. So depending on which ROM you use and which options you choose, it can take quite a while to get it right. So once I formatted system, I'm going to go back, go into wipe cache. And again, these instructions are specific to this ROM. Make sure you read the instructions for each ROM. Wipe Dalvik cache. So once you've done all that, we're going to choose to apply update from SD card. Install zip from SD card. And then choose zip. Go down to wherever you put the zip file. And here's Jelly Sandwich. And install. Just going to start a timer. So some of the newer ROMs do come with this nice graphical installer instead of just navigating through those text links. So here's the installer, English, next, next. So you can choose your theme, generic, ICS, etc. Doesn't really matter for the installer. You're going to install Jelly Sandwich for the Arc. User agreements. And then what's new in 6.2, 6.1, etc. So install ROM. So once again, read the warnings, be very careful, etc. So choose whichever apps you want, choose the theme in the launcher, status bars, lock screens, tools and apps, modifications. So for example, you can choose to have the Android open source call screen. Typically, I don't install super user through this. I've had issues, but you can try it directly. Jelly Bean drivers, boot animation. I like the Xperia Nexus one. Device name. Wipe your battery stats. Install Google Chrome. If you have a locked bootloader, you can install any other kernel. So I'm just going to skip that. Got apps, so Root Browser Lite, Google Talk, the XDA app if you want it, all the Sony ringtones, James Bond sounds from the new Xperia phone, tweaks, Jelly Sandwich font or the Jelly Bean font, icons, so Sony Xperia or the Pureness icons, and then whichever settings app you want. So here's colorful, and timescape if you want it. So next, these applications you want to remove. So typically I just remove email because I use Gmail. Next, and then hit install. So different ROMs will have different installers, different ROMs will have different options, and make sure you read everything before installing the ROM. If you do get into an error or boot loop, you're going to have to flash your phone again, root it, and go through the process all over again. So once it's finished installing, it's going to ask you to reboot, so just uncheck that, because you do want to install one more thing, which is root. I find it's easier to install root through recovery than to install using the ROMs, because sometimes it might not work. But again, it's dependent on each ROM. So again, choose zip from SD card, go down to download again, and install super user. Go. Once that's all done, reboot your phone and wait for it to restart. So once the phone's booted up, see if we got different widgets. Different launcher. Just to show off some of the apps here. There's Google Chrome, Root Browser Lite, just to show that it is rooted. Colorful Settings app. All the new icons. Boats. And it's Jelly Sandwich. A lot of these ROMs allow you to do things like change the widgets, so you can change the order. Pick which buttons you want to show up. So let's say get rid of GPS and Bluetooth. So now when you go down here, there's no more GPS and Bluetooth. So this is just one of the many ROMs on the development forum. As always, make sure you read all the instructions on how to install it, what settings you need to do, what files you need to download, etc. And always back up your phone before you modify it. If anything goes wrong, like you get stuck in a boot loop, just flash your phone over, just like the beginning of this video. With that in mind, have fun modifying your phone, and once again, thanks for watching.